Well, what happened was I had first broadcast partner. I had Spencer Ross. I had Spencer for a couple of years, and then they wanted to make a change. They got Howard David, and Howard David came in, and I had done a game with Sean.
Was this the test that we were talking about?
No.
Okay.
No.
There's more to the story.
Yeah, he came in. Howard has something to do, or something happened, and they brought Sean in, and I, he and I did the broadcast, and we had a good broadcast. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know if I was going to see Sean again. I said, good luck. And the next thing I know, he was gone, to Minnesota. And then I think once Howard was let go, they were trying to find, and then they came to me and said, well, we got Sean Grande. I said, I work with Sean already. Mm-hmm. He said, guy said, well, why don't you call him up? Tell him to come on. I said, well, give me his number. And I called him and talked, we talked about him coming back. And he was like, yeah, and came back. And that's how. And I'll let Sean finish the rest
of it. Well, that phone call is what first made me change my mind about leaving Minnesota, which I was not going to do. I was doing TV in Minnesota. I was 20-something years old. It seemed like a job I was going to be in for a long time. But here's something. You want something that has never been said on the air before, that I've never talked about publicly?
Yes, I do.
When the change was made that Max was just referring to Howard David in 1997, 6 months earlier, that job had been promised to me. At 25 years old, I was going to join Max in 1997 to become the radio voice of the Celtics. And then a funny thing happened. Rick Pitino arrived. And suddenly the profile changed. Mm-hmm. And suddenly this was going to be a glamour franchise under Rick Pitino, and they didn't want a 25-year-old kid.
How did that go?
Yeah, that's kind of the point, Hal. It's funny. And as you like to say about Marty Glickman, he is gone. I am here, and he is not. But at 25 years old, that was for about 4 or 5 months. That was the plan.
Who knows? Rick might be back.
He's working his way back, right? He's in St. John's. He's getting closer.
He was overseas. Next thing he was in.
He's getting closer.
Step by step. Moving fast, moving closer. Yeah.
But in any case, and then when that got reneged from me, obviously I was not happy, and I was going to take the first job that came, and a year later, Minnesota TV job came, and I went and did that. Before that, in that 97-98 season, before I went to Minnesota, that was the night that Howard David, who was doing Monday Night Football and the Celtics, he got snowed in. And he didn't get snowed in Miami, but he couldn't get back to Boston because there was snow in Boston. Flight wasn't going to get here. And they walked into my little booth that I did the updates. And Max and I, our first on-air together was actually on Glenn Ordway's show in the late 90s, because Max was one of the rotating co-hosts that we would have come in with Glenn Ordway. And I did my little character, my little anti-establishment Generation X character. So that was the first time I worked with Max. So I'm in my booth. They came in at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They said, get over to the Garden. You're doing the game tonight. And about an hour later, the aforementioned Rick Pitino, I'm like, Jeff Twist marches me into the office, and there I am face-to-face doing an interview with Rick Pitino. And Celtics played that night and won. And Max and I it was December 23rd. It was Christmas. And
he didn't know numbers, though.
I didn't have any numbers.
That's what I'm thinking.
You know what? I get it. I see where you're getting confused.
No. He can repeat things to me, which to me is amazing. When he says,
it's memory.
He'll say, 2000. I know when that happened. 2008.
Yep.
Or it happened.
Photograph. I say it all the time.
It happened 2008, and I was like, oh yeah, they getting. He always gets on me for saying the other day. I'll say the other day in a heartbeat.
It's like
the other day
yesterday.
It might be 2 years ago.
Could be yesterday.
Could be yesterday. I don't know. I always say the other day. So he does that.
Well, that's not. Again, those aren't numbers. That's a memory, and yeah, I remember. I have a bizarre thing that has aided me in my career, and that I know that in the 2003-2004 season, when the Celtics lost that lead to Brooklyn earlier this year, I remembered the game against Phoenix that they had lost with Marbury and Stoudemire, and I remembered that we couldn't fly out the next day because of a snowstorm, and they won back-to-back games at Utah, at Denver that night, and then we went to Salt Lake the next night. The Celtics won again. I remember all that. Where are my car keys? No idea. But I have all this useless information of institutional memory, which I realize now they call it that because you're going to end up in an institution because you can't forget all of this.
True. You have a great memory, and numbers just happen to fall into that.
If you say so.
All right, so getting back to those first couple of games that you guys had, it was kind of like a test run. And
I filled in.
Not necessarily a test, but
when I went to Minnesota, I filled in. They called me when I was doing It's called on the phone. They called Press Row. This is how old school this is. Can you get down to Sacramento because Howard David couldn't do a game in Sacramento, and I met Max down there. So we had done a couple of games together. But I'm doing TV in Minnesota. So funny to me. And people are like, "Oh, you're doing TV this year. Let's go. Oh, you're good at TV." I'm like, I was kind of doing it 25 years ago. But when Max called me, I thought not just the games we had done, but his style. I thought this could be a thing. This could be a long-running thing that fits together. And I remember vividly we had a long preseason road trip. Max will tell you about the statistician that we had in Little Rock, Arkansas that I picked out, and another life lesson I learned. Yeah, you will, the hard way.
Always go with beauty, okay?
What does Chris Rock say? the most powerful thing in the world. Yeah, that's probably another story for another time. But I remember this long road trip where all of a sudden there was music.
Can you get me to these stats? She likes stats. What
we had.
What do you
we were
want?
allowed to have
Max knows exactly what Sean's about to
He
talk
knows that
about.
story.
I
Yeah,
don't remember that. Hey, we got these stats.
We got to have a statistician on the road in those days. He
Yeah.
gave you money, like you could give money to a statistician. And I had come from doing college football on ABC, where they would have these sort of nonsense jobs that they would pick out, shall we say, students that went to that university, maybe to sit in the truck and
tread lightly. Tread lightly.
Anyway,
here.
this is the environment I came up with. So they offered me 3 different people. These are 3 different people that could do stats for you that night. And I made a choice probably based not so much on who might the best statistician be, but maybe some other intangible qualities. And as it turns out, I don't think she could have spelled cat if you spotted her the C and the A. And adding
didn't
2
know
plus
what the
2.
stats were that you
So
were
that
looking
was a
for.
bit of a struggle and a bit of a life lesson that I think we all learn as younger men.
But this is what
it's
happens
funny.
when
Max
you're in your
remembers
20s.
that. He doesn't remember the Amari Stoudemire game.
I couldn't tell you. Look, I can't tell you when it was. I can't tell you the date. I can just tell
October
you.
But you remember
2001.
it happening.
Little Rock, Arkansas.
That's all I can tell you happened. That was it.
What were you thinking? I know we just heard what Sean was thinking during those first couple games that like this could work. Us being next to each other. What were you thinking?
We had a good relationship, and and what he was doing and his style. Because as an analyst on the other side, you are pretty much. I always say you are the accent. You're the salt and pepper for what the other guy's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And what Sean does is he has a way of telling you a story, and then what I do is I add the ketchup. I add the mustard, I add the pickles, and all those things. He puts the main meat and potatoes out there, and that's what I do. I follow up with that, and that is what makes us. I don't try to get in his lane, and nor does he try to get in my lane. And trying to tell stories like that.
Is that true?
I have more. Stories.
Sean just made a face.
Because I think the face is that I think it's become one lane.
Okay.
I have. He has stories. I have stories which might accent a certain thing that might have happened. And Sean will tell you what happened, and I can tell you a story that might have been with Tommy, could have been with Robert Parrish, could have been with Larry Bird. And I think that our listeners a lot of times like to have that connection. If he tells a story, I might tell you something about Paul Pierce when Paul Pierce first got here. And those guys that I knew at that time, like Jason Tatum, I will always have my Jason Tatum story. Jason Tatum didn't really know who I was, but Jason Tatum saw 30 for 30. And so that day he comes.
I remember this.
He's out getting ready to shoot around, and I'm standing there. He goes, cornbread. I said, what's wrong with you, man? He said, man, I saw that 30 for 30 2 times. Damn, you were bad. And just a few more choice words, but those stories will stay with me. But that's been my connection with the players that we have now, and the players that we've had in the past, and my connection with Kevin Garnett and Sean and I saw some stuff on the planes which just have been just surreal when you think
that we can't talk about.
No, you can actually. Well, you're keeping on the 100, ain't you?
Hell yeah!
You're keeping on the 100. We can talk about it.
This is behind the scenes with the Boston Celtics. That's part of the name of this podcast. So let's go.
Yeah.
If you want to drop something,
part of you're talking about my memory, whatever. Part of my memory now is that I have a lot of his memory in my memory, so I know when there's a time to tell.
That's kind of sick.
Time to tell a story. Well, listen, let's face it. This is the longest relationship either one of us has ever had. So, you after years of hearing the stories and telling the stories, you know what fits, and that's why we can. As I like to say, you guys, you finish as each other's, and I'm like sandwiches. No, but you get the point that it just becomes a natural. We don't need to have a 4-hour production meeting to go on the air. And
good luck with that.
Exactly. We're not going to have
Max
a 4-hour
wants
production
to do
meeting.
that for every game.
I know. I don't think we've had 4 hours worth of production meetings in 22 years. If you were to add them all up,
What about 4 minutes?
I think that it just there's
The
an opposite approach.
best broadcasts are people who naturally get together and understand what they're doing.
Yep.
And it's not contrived, because you can tell people who have studied, and I learned this from over the years as I was going through broadcasting, that I could get all the notes I want, but if those notes don't fit what he's talking about, it's going to be awkward for me to get those notes into a certain area. And you can't. You want to use those notes. You studied and you did this, and this guy shoots a certain percent. You might not even be able to use that.
Yep.
So that's why Tommy Heinsohn said, "Let the story tell itself." All you're doing.
What do you
is
say about the game notes?
You don't need them.
Those are for the other guys.
Yeah, my Tommy Heinsohn.
Probably true.
Let's make sure we get
That's where all the numbers lie.
This is a
An
imitation
of Tommy Heinsohn.
Yes,
that once got Max on the front page of the Boston Herald.
Yep,
God.
absolutely.